Blizzard Entertainment presents Midnight, the newest expansion for World of Warcraft. Midnight calls every hero home to Azeroth. All paths lead to this moment. Xalatath rises, the Void follows, and the Sunwell stands in peril. Raiders, explorers, storytellers, newcomers, and legends alike. This is your world, your story, your moment. Because Azeroth is home, and home is always worth fighting for. Available now at worldofwarcraft.com.
Disney Plus wants to know, are you ready? For Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, now streaming on Disney Plus.
Let's do this.
One of the best Marvel movies of all time is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Hey, you weren't listening to me.
I said Thunderbolts, The New Avengers is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Meet the New Avengers.
That's a cool name.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, rated PG-13, now streaming on, you guessed it, Disney Plus.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Jay Scott. This is The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe and healthy out there. It is crazy time, crazy world. Treat each other right. Let's get through all this, and let's find each other on the other side, and hopefully one day we'll be able to have normalcy into our lives, and I think we're getting closer and closer, hopefully. Hopefully we are. Maybe I'm just optimistic. Like to welcome in our next guest, a repeat offender, return guest to the show, the most handsome man ever to appear on the podcast, and that is Mr. Joey Cassata. How you doing, Joey?
Woo-hoo-hoo! Now that's an introduction. Wow. I'll take it. I can't imagine it's true, but I'll take it anyway. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Just getting by here outside of Chicago. Hopefully, fall is now in the air, change of season. Hopefully changes on the horizon. We can get back to our normal lives as closely as we can, at least,
I agree. It's been a crazy, almost 9 months now, I guess, right? So, yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure when we'll be back to normal, but at least we'll be back to maybe some kind of normalcy coming up.
Yeah, it's just the unknown right now. I can't believe it's been 9 months. Well, actually, it started in March, so it's more like 6 months right now. But it doesn't It just feels like the days are running together. It feels like, I don't know if you've had the experience where you're trying to think of when something happened, and you're like, when did that happen? Did that happen this year? Did it happen last year? Because there's no time markers that you have on a normal year where you can say, oh, that was the summer, that was the spring, that was the winter. You're just like, I have no idea when that happened. I don't remember when that happened.
No, you couldn't have said it any better. You're so right. I've been going through so many times feeling like this whole year has just like been lost. It's like no events have happened, no big occurrences have happened because no one's been able to do anything. So it's almost like every time I think of something, I almost immediately go right back to last year. So it's funny, like 2020 is like almost a wash right now.
Yeah. And, I know there's people out there that think that as soon as the calendar turns to January 1st, 2021, everything's just going to miraculously go away. And unfortunately, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think, hopefully we're not going to see any significant change back to normal lives till at least spring, summer of next year, unfortunately. At least that's what I think, just based on what I've read and just observing people talking and the quote unquote experts telling us what's going to be happening.
Yeah, I think unfortunately people are waiting for the big, it's over, it's done, we're back. That's never going to happen. So what it's going to be is slowly getting back to our normal lives, whether it's COVID gone, whether we're just dealing with it better, whatever it's going to be. I just think it's going to be a slow transition. There's not going to be an event where someone comes on the news and says, okay, everyone, we're back. It's not going to happen like that.
No. As much as we wanted to, it's just not. But, thankful to you, you've just released a new book, Wrestling with Joeylicious, and that's helped us take our minds off, or at least me. At least I can't speak for everybody else, but, reading your book, I got to escape a little bit and get into the world of Joeylicious, the world of Joey Cassata, and I'm thankful for that because I interviewed you back in, I think it was March, with the Start With a Dream book, which was just a tremendous book. You followed up with this, which is a little bit different, obviously, and not just the subject matter, but just the story and, the way it's written. But both tremendous books. Joeylicious is just a book that will make you laugh out loud, even if you're not a big wrestling fan, which I'm not. I mean, I was a casual fan back when I was younger with, Junkyard Dog and Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and Mr. Wonderful and all those people back then, the Hart Foundation. And it kind of brought me back to that time, but it also is a funny story. It's like a mix between Rocky meets Private Eyes with Don Knotts and who's the other guy? I can't. No,
that's a good. I mean, that's a good way to put it. I mean, I do like in all the interviews I've been doing, I like to describe the book as Rocky meets Seinfeld. It's really it's the wacky, zany characters of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm and those types of comedies. But it's the feel-good story of this underdog like Rocky. You really don't have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy the book. It's a nostalgia book. It's a feel-good book. It's a wacky, fun comedy. Like I said, very Seinfeld-esque, where it's really based on the characters, and they just happen to be in the world of wrestling.
I find it because we talked before, and I went to Catholic school. You and I are around the same age. And there's so many funny moments that I personally feel because, going to the rectory when I was in, Catholic school and my mother making sure she was always at mass and she would always say novenas for me and everything. And
oh my God, so funny. Yeah.
So I have that connection with it, which is this, maybe it's different for other people, but because, and you also touch on it would Start With a Dream too, with the relationship with the principal of the Catholic school, and it's just for me it's like on another level of connecting with a story and having friends that are similar to who you grew up with and your buddy Scally, who I can pick 2 or 3 of my old friends that are just like that, which is scary. But it's just a tremendous, and it's a quick read compared to Start With a Dream, which I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's writing over a 500-page book. This is about half of that, a little less than half of it, but it's a quick read. I mean, your writing style is fantastic because it really grabs you, and it's just, I don't want to say simple as a bad thing, but it's not complicated, and someone like myself who has a short attention span can get through this in a few days, which is awesome.
Right. Again, I can be myself, even though this book is mostly fiction. It's, it's semi-based on my real life, but, I can be myself. I can sure as hell write myself. So that's what's so good about, the 2 books that I released. So Start With a Dream is an autobiography about my life in the music world and the entertainment industry. And this book is a fictitious book based on my real life, where if I wasn't a musician and I didn't succeed as a musician, what would have happened if I went the route of becoming a professional wrestler? And that's kind of what this book is about. It's almost like those old comic books from the 1980s, the What If series. What if Joey Cassata pursued wrestling instead of drums? And that's what this book is about. And it's funny that you mentioned, the Catholic school and the different things that you can relate to. When I released my first book, I was assuming that, all my Z-Rock fans and ZO2 music fans and all these people would buy the book. But what I was pleasantly surprised to hear was that everyone that really enjoyed the book, those things were secondary. All the music stuff and all the, time spent with rock stars on the road and all this other stuff, that almost became secondary to just my life story as a kid from Brooklyn, a Catholic Italian from Brooklyn, growing up in the 80s, in pop culture references of the 80s, whether it's malls or Sam Goody stores or Ticketron or Madison Square Garden. That's the same feel Joeylicious has too. Joeylicious, even though it's based in the world of wrestling, it's a very references of when you're a kid and feel-good stories of growing up in the 80s. And like you said, I have characters in the book that almost everyone probably had in their life as kids. So that's really what the book is about. Of course, the premise of the book is me as a wannabe wrestler now in my 40s that never succeeded, unfortunately, and I'm still pursuing my dream. And throughout the book, these wrestling legends appear to me in my imagination to kind of guide me along my journey. It always backfires, and it always becomes a worse situation than where I started. But I have guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan, and all these Mick Foley, all these big time wrestlers are appearing in the book to kind of help me through my journey.
You mentioned that it's loosely based on your life. There's some elements in there that are true. Is the wrestlers guiding you in your life the true part?
No, so that obviously. Well, I don't. You know what? If it was, I might have to go to see a psychiatrist. But the real stuff that's based on my life is I absolutely adored wrestling growing up. All the stuff with me and my friend Scally that happens in the book, a lot of that stuff is based on true stories. We were really altar boys together. We really got into a lot of shenanigans together. We really saw Hulk Hogan win the title for the very first time together. All of that stuff really happened. Where the fictitious stuff comes in is, like I said, what if I did pursue the life of a wrestler? I never actually pursued becoming a wrestler in real life. So that's really the fictitious part. And then, of course, the wrestlers appearing to me in my imagination. Even though my wife says that is kind of coming true because I'm really just having these guys appear with me on my show to kind of play with.
Yeah, and I like how you incorporate what you've done on your show with the book, too, as well.
So that's really where the book started. So obviously, Wrestling with Joeylicious is a TV concept. You can find the episodes on Amazon Prime right now streaming. They're also on my YouTube page. There's 5 short episodes, from 6 to 8 minutes long. They're really quick watches. They're fun episodes. They're little clips featuring me and some of the wrestlers that I named. There's me and Mick Foley, me and Roddy Piper, me and the Iron Sheik, Tito Santana, Jimmy Snooker, Nikolai Volkov, all these 80s wrestling legends. Same thing like as in the book, they appear to me in my imagination. So the book, the way it started was because of COVID, where we started this conversation, unfortunately, all production for the show, ceased to exist. No production companies were taking meetings. No TV networks wanted to hear about a new TV show that we needed to produce because production shut down. Hollywood shut down. So what I and my partner decided to do, we already had the whole entire first season of Joeylicious scripted out. So we said, okay, well, while we're in COVID and we can't produce a television show, let's take our scripts and turn it into a novel. So what you're reading is basically what would happen in the first season of Wrestling with Joeylicious. What you read in the first book, because what you mentioned on my initial book, Start With a Dream, was so big, we actually took the first season and broke it up into 2 parts. So Wrestling with Joeylicious, the book, part 2 will be coming shortly, and you'll see how the real first season ends.
Yeah, I was really upset about that when I got to the end of the book. I was reading, I don't want to give too much away, but as I'm reading and I'm seeing like, okay, there's only a few more pages left here. How is this going? This you can't wrap this up. I'm like, how is this gonna?
Right.
And then you get the to be continued at the end, and I'm like, oh. Suddenly I feel like I'm in an episode of Young and the Restless or Days of Our Lives where I gotta wait.
Perfect.
I always judge a book and how it makes me feel and how it can bring the atmosphere to the room I'm in when I'm reading it. When we talk about Start With a Dream, I could feel myself going back to those record stores that I visited when I was a kid. I could feel myself in clubs with my buddies who were in bands and listening to their music, and I could smell it and I could taste it. And that's such a tremendous way to capture a reader when a writer does that. Similar to that, with Joeylicious, I could feel the smell or sense the smell of the old Catholic schools, because I went to Catholic school, when you guys are wrestling in the gymnasiums at the school. I can, because they all got that unique smell that is unlike no other. When you walk into like an old Catholic school, it just has this fragrance that's like a mix between like urine and like that stuff that they used to put on like the throw up when a kid would throw up in the hallway.
Oh, you remember that powder stuff they put on there?
The pink powder. But that's how.
No, but you're so right. Again, that's one of the best compliments I've ever heard. I try to, again, I'm Joey from Brooklyn, so, I'm not a novelist. I'm not a writer. I'm a guy from Brooklyn. I'm a drummer. I'm a wrestling fan. What I like to do is what I can do and what I'm hoping I'm doing is bringing you into whatever I'm talking about. I can tell a great story. Can I write a great story? Well, all I'm doing is really writing down how I talk. It's the same dialogue, the same emphasis, the same inflections that I would use in everyday conversation. I'm not the best writer in the world. I have, a million spell check issues and grammar issues as I'm writing. But, luckily with computers, those get corrected by the computer. So I don't have to worry about that. But what I can do is speak like a real person. And I find so many books out there hard to read because the writer doesn't speak in a normal voice. They try to speak at you instead of with you. And that's the one thing I always can do when I write. I feel like I'm very conversational. Not because I'm intentionally being conversational, only because that's what I know how to do. I'm a conversational person. I can talk, and I love to talk, as you can tell. And I love doing interviews and chatting with people. So to tell a story in a book, it's the same thing. I'm just writing it down on a Word doc.
That's so true. I was going to say that. Reading your books is like being involved in a conversation. And I think that's why the books are so quick when you're reading them. They fly by, because it's like a conversation. Like you're on the phone with somebody and it feels like 5 minutes and you've been on the phone for 2 hours. That's kind of how it feels. That's kind of, whenever I would take in Joeylicious or Start With a Dream, I would lose track of time because it felt like I was listening to somebody talk, and you describe it perfectly. But yeah, it's so awesome when I can smell that school, in that gymnasium, and I can feel, because I've been in, Catholic school gymnasiums for the first part of my life. I played basketball. I, went to different schools, and they all smelled the same. They all had the same paint. They all had the same windows. It's just, you feel that. I don't know if anybody gets that who's never been to a Catholic school, but you definitely paint a picture where people can get a clear description of what's going on.
Well, what I like to do too is I had such an amazing childhood, whether it was with friends and family and all this stuff. I love to paint the picture of kids like us that grew up in the 80s. There were so many things, we didn't have iPads and all that stuff. We had what we had. We had, our Walkmans, and we had, like you said, we used to live in our gymnasiums and stuff like that. So I love to reference all the stuff that I can still remember or smell or taste all throughout my childhood. When I'm writing, sometimes I don't even remember things until I start jotting them down. Even something like the throw-up powder you were just talking about. I wish I would have remembered that as I was writing it, because I would have loved to included that. Because as soon as you said it, I got that whiff in my nostril as soon as you said it, and it brought me right back to being in the hallway with some stupid bastard throwing up in front of me and then having to sprinkle the throw powder on it. But that's what I like to do. The 80s were such a magical time. Maybe it was for everyone, I'm not sure, but for me, growing up in the 80s was such a magical time. I love to bring people back to that time, what I'm writing. Even like the old 80s movies. I love showing my kids the old 80s movies like Stand By Me or Goonies, or we just watched E.T. the other night for the first time. There's a feel to these movies that captures some kind of youthful innocence that I don't think we have anymore, and I don't think kids today have anymore, that only people from our generation can really relate to.
I agree. I think our generation is the last generation to have that innocence for a longer period of time. Now, kids are so connected on social media or the internet, they can find things that were not readily accessible when we were growing up. And I think that makes a huge difference in how kids view things and how kids engage in conversation. It's a lot different. You know, I have a 15-year-old, and he's a lot different at this age than I was when I was his age growing up. You know, I mean, I was staying at home by myself because both my parents worked when I was 11 years old. You know, my mom,
right.
don't let anybody in, don't answer the phone, you know, and that's what I did. I never answered the door. I never answered the phone. I'd sit there for 2.5 hours, and then she'd call me, take out the chicken, it's frozen. I got to, you know, cook that or whatever, you know. But we had not so much that we were independent, but we had a little bit more responsibility at an earlier age for ourselves, right? Now parents kind of hover over their kids, and they're on top of their kids, and they don't let them breathe, and they don't let them develop that responsibility.
I couldn't agree with you more. Everything you just said, I went through. I was home by myself all afternoon, and you know, I could never imagine letting my kids be alone. You know, at a time with no one being home, it just wouldn't happen today. So if it's because the world has shrunk because of social media, and you know, we realize there's a lot more terrors in the world and bad people in the world, or maybe, you know, our parents were just more carefree. I'm not sure what it is, but whatever it was back in the 80s, we just had this youthfulness about us, but yet still independent and mature. And it's something that I love to write about. And I don't intentionally write about it. Like I said, I just write from experience. I don't know if I could, you know, write a science fiction story, even though I do have a science fiction comic book out right now too on Amazon. But, you know, I'm not great at painting stuff that I don't know. So if it's something that I'm familiar with, I think I can paint a nice picture with a nice broad stroke. And luckily, Joeylicious is that world. You know, not only the nostalgia part that we're talking about as growing up as 80s kids, but the world of wrestling. I'm so familiar with it. And it's been such an easy way to write and get all this stuff out because I love that world. I grew up in it, and I'm still immersed in it. I'm still a big wrestling fan to today. And to kind of imagine myself as one of those wrestlers in that world, it was a pretty easy write for me. So I enjoy doing stuff like that. And so far, so good. Everyone's enjoying it, it's crazy that it was the #1 wrestling book in the country for the first 2 weeks that it was on its release on Amazon. Now, I'm talking, I beat guys like Jim Ross, Chris Jericho, the Young Bucks, even Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. Somehow I beat all of those books the first few weeks that my book was out. So the response has been incredible.
Do you find that the connection you have with wrestling is very similar to the connection you have with music?
Yeah, again, going back, you know, I hate to keep going back to the 80s, but I think pop culture in the 80s, whether it was Kiss or wrestling or comic books or Star Wars or Saturday morning cartoons, all of that stuff, everyone I feel like that enjoyed one of those things, and if you grew up in the 80s and didn't enjoy one of the things I just mentioned, something was probably wrong with you. So if you enjoyed one of those things, I think more than likely you enjoyed almost all of those things, or at least could associate with all of those things. Because I think the fandom of the 80s kids like us is the biggest fandom ever. I think the way we grew up and became fans of something, we became fans for life. I'm a fan for Kiss for life. I'm a fan of wrestling for life. I'm a fan of comic books for life. And all of that stuff I got introduced to in the early 80s. Nowadays, I think a kid will like the new Avengers movie, but then next week they'll forget about it and watch the new YouTube sensation or this and that. It's not like it was where, you know, you were all consumed with what you loved. And I think that's why I can relate to the rock world with these wrestling stories the way I'm relating to the wrestlers in this world. So it's easy because I think it's the same fan base. Kiss fans, I think, are wrestling fans and are Star Wars fans and are comic book fans. So that whole genre of pop culture, I think everyone can enjoy.
I think it's about the accessibility with today's generation. When we were growing up in the 80s, you mentioned Star Wars. When that was on TV, if you were not home that night, you missed it. Or if there was a wrestling match on that night, you missed it. Of course, there was the VCR that came along in the mid 80s and beyond. But for the most part, you had to be there, and it gained an appreciation for whatever you were listening to. You think about a song that you wanted to hear on the radio, right? You had to wait and have the radio on in order for you to hear the song. Now you can go on the computer and you can download a bunch of music in an afternoon, and you can have 100 hours worth of music in just an instant. Now, back then, you bought one album, and you had to enjoy that album for however long it took to get the next album, which was usually a month later or a few months later, whenever it was. So there wasn't a sense of, we all needed to have it back then, right? We needed to have it. But once we had it, we had to appreciate it. Where I think now the reason why everything is so short in terms of how much attention is given to it is because it's so accessible and it's not special. You know what I mean? Like everything's felt special, like you mentioned. Star Wars, cartoons, comic books, movies, music, Kiss, wrestling. That all felt special because it was on one day or 2 days of the week. The video, you didn't know when the video for Kiss was going to be on, so you had to wait. And that waiting helped you appreciate it.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you just said. I think, I could picture myself as a kid having the new Kiss record in my hand, and I would literally stare at the record, the vinyl, the jacket, the in-sleeve, for weeks at a time. I would listen to that record for weeks upon end and just read every single note and every single credit on that liner note over and over and over again, and stare at the pictures. And I was absolutely consumed with that. Same thing with television. You'd have a certain amount of episodes of, rock and wrestling on TV, or a certain amount of episodes of Transformers. You would memorize all of your favorite things, whereas today you have so much that you have to consume. It's impossible to enjoy something as much as we enjoyed stuff back then. And I'm not knocking it. Don't get me wrong. I'm a victim of it myself. Very rarely will I will never get into something new like I got into back then, because I'm the same way as a kid today. I'm on to the next thing. I listen to Spotify all day. I'll do songs or shuffles or whatever it is. Very rarely am I, like even the new Ace Frehley album that just came out. Yeah, I listened to it once already, but I'm not consumed by it. I'll probably put it on again as a playlist, but I'm not staring at the jacket and learning every lyric and riff and, everything that happened. So, it's hard to say that a kid today is ever going to like stuff the way we like it. But I get it. They have their advantages too. You know what I would have given to have YouTube as a kid? Imagine having YouTube and being able to go on to see any live concert you ever wanted to see. It's incredible. But there's a sacrifice too, because like we said, you don't appreciate it because you have too much. It's almost like that spoiled kid that has too many toys to play with. He doesn't appreciate that one toy growing up. I remember my one toy that I savored beyond all my other toys was my Voltron action figure, my Voltron Lions, the die-cast Lions. And I savored it because I didn't have a lot of toys. So I knew that was my favorite, and I played with it every day. If I would have had 7,000 toys, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate it as much. So I understand the gripes of today's world.
Voltron was the underground Transformer. That was like what people watched who weren't Transformer fans, was Voltron.
Voltron was first, right?
Yes. But I always liked him more than Transformers. I thought the stories were a little bit more engaging. Transformer, they get into trouble and they would just transform into whatever, where Voltron was, there was more storyline to it, I felt.
Not even looking back, again, I'm still, like I said before, everything I loved as a kid, I still am so passionate about today. I'm a huge, big-time 80s cartoon buff, so I can still watch the old Voltron series today. It lives up. Some of the stuff from the 80s, I was a tremendous Transformer fan as a kid, too. But looking back, you're so right. The Transformers cartoon series doesn't live up storyline-wise today as some of the others. Even a show like He-Man, the storylines are still great today. Whereas I watch some of the Thundercat episodes that I loved as a kid, they don't hold up as much. So it's funny, when you're a kid, you don't realize as much, the significance of deep storylines. But today, I can appreciate that stuff more.
As we go into like deep storylines, your book Start with a Dream talks about the relationship you had with your mother and how close you were and the impact she had on your life. You included her as one of the main characters in the Joeylicious book. Is that a way to help you keep her memory and her closeness with you?
You know what? Subconsciously, it probably is. I just couldn't. There was no way for me to tell this Joeylicious story with me and my buddy Scally without having my mom involved. Because, as you read Start with the Dream, my mom was the biggest part of my life, out of anyone growing up. And she was every part of my life. So to have a story based on those years of my life and not have my mom involved, I don't even know if I'd be able to tell it, even if it is part fiction. So especially, and if she was here today, she would tell you all the shenanigans that my buddy Scally and I got into as kids, where my mom had to scream and yell at us. I'll tell a story. This is not part of the first Joeylicious book, but it is in part of the second book. There's a flashback where Scally and I legitimately were altar boys together. And my mom was so proud of me, and she brought all of her friends to see me at church, and, proud of her little boy serving mass, little boy of God. And Scally and I, being the goofy morons that we are, we got into a laughing fit earlier that day in class, and it carried over into mass. And unfortunately, we just couldn't stop laughing. You ever be in a situation where someone super strict tells you stop laughing?
Yes.
It's the worst thing possible, because now all you're going to do is laugh. So we had this priest on the altar with us, yelling at us in front of a full church of people, stop laughing. And it just, snowballed out of control, and he literally threw us off the altar. So, times like that, I have to retell, because my mom was legitimately part of that. So I had to have her in this story as this grounding figure for these morons of what Joeylicious and Scally are.
So my funny altar boy story is I was 7th or 8th grade. It was a hot summer day, and it was the Saturday evening mass that sometimes they have before the Sunday masses.
Sure.
And my mother made dinner. She made pasta before we went there. And it's hot. I got the altar boy garb on. I'm sitting in the pew with my two buddies on the side of the altar. And all of a sudden, I feel gas coming on, right? And I'm like, I just got to hold it in or let it out really slow so no one hears it or anything like that. So I'm sitting there trying to game plan how I'm going to let this fart out of my ass. And the doors are open because it's hot. And there was a little bit of a breeze and something picked up, and I got a sneeze coming. So I sneeze, and at the same time I fart. Except the fart was louder than the sneeze, and it echoed off the wooden pew. And every head in the church turned in unison at the same time to look at me. And I just look at my mother in the back of the church doing a face palm as she's just like looking at me like my son just ruined mass because of this fart sneeze that was just louder than anything could possibly be.
Again, I can relate to because I have so many of those mass stories. There's a story in my Start with the Dream book where every Christmas, you'd go to, or was it Easter? God, I don't remember now. You'd go to midnight mass, and there was a midnight mass every year, and all of my friends would go, and it was more of a social gathering than anything else. And as we got older, we would have drinks and, some beers in the parking lot and 40 ounces and stuff like that. And my one moron friend snuck his 40 ounce into church with him. And something happened that, we were goofing around in the back and one of us pushed each other and he dropped the 40 ounce right in the back of the church. Now, picture what a sound that hit when that 40 ounce hit that floor. Picture the sound that echoed through that church.
Oh, man.
Every eyeball turned around and looked at us like we were the devil. So, these are the times, as bad as that story is and as bad as, the community thought we were as kids back then, I wouldn't give up that memory for all the, the prayers in the world. It was a great time to live and have fun and, get in trouble and goof around as a kid. And that's kind of what my books are all about. My books are all about, think about all the 80s sitcoms and all the 80s movies that you know and love with the boys and that get into trouble and, they have fun and, whether it's from Porky's or Stand By Me and all these fun shenanigans that these kids get into, that's what my books are all about. And that's what Wrestling with Joeylicious is. It's basically kids from the 80s, getting into trouble. It's flashbacks and telling all the stories back then to growing up. And you know what? We never really grew up. We're still those bad kids from the 80s. And that's really what my life is today.
Yeah, the mischievous never leaves you that you had in the 80s, right? Even though we're adults now and we have kids and we got responsibility, there's always that little bit of mischief that we have in there that we never lose.
And why, to me, everyone always says, oh, grow up, do this. Why? Why should we lose it? Why should we grow up? I could have never imagined a better life for myself. I grew up a certain way and I'm still that person. I have the same values. I have the same enjoyment. I have the same personality. I have the same things that I find funny. A fart is still funny to me. You just told me a fart story. I was hysterical laughing. So why should we grow up? We're having, we had a great youth. And just because I'm older now doesn't mean I can't think and have fun and be a stuck up, stick up the ass grown up. For what? I have kids. I'm still a parent. I teach them values, but my parents my mom anyway, my mom taught the same values to me that I still hold dearly that I'm teaching to my kids. It doesn't mean that I can't also teach my kids to have fun and be a little mischievous, which my wife yells at me all the time about. But, that's what it's all about. Again, that's what fun storytelling is about too. It's, the straight-laced story is not the fun story. Porky's, when the kids are bad in ET and they're sneaking ET away from the scientist, that's the fun stuff. You don't want to read a story about, it's a comedy. It's a fun, feel-good piece. You don't want to feel a lesson being taught and me preaching to you. I'm just trying to make you laugh. That's all I'm doing.
You mentioned the underground wrestling organizations in the book Joeylicious. There's one in particular, obviously, that's in the book. How prevalent are those still? I know they were big back, in the 80s and in the 70s. Are they still popular? Because, we have a little bit of it here in Chicago. I imagine they have some on the East Coast. But what's the impact that those underground wrestling organizations have on pro wrestling?
Yeah, those leagues are still all throughout the country, still as bigger, maybe bigger than ever, underground wrestling leagues and indie wrestling leagues. The league that I feature in my book is called Brawl, Brooklyn's Really Awesome Wrestling League. And it's a completely fictitious league, but it's the league that, I created for Joeylicious. And, it's really based on, I remember being a kid in grammar school, in Catholic grammar school, and every once in a while, we would have indie wrestling in our gymnasium. And it was the greatest thing in the world to me because I was already a giant wrestling fan. And I would go to Madison Square Garden all the time to see the big event. And I saw Hogan win the title and I saw Andre the Giant live. But I was always in the nosebleed seats. I could never see these guys. It was miserable. But when the indie wrestling came around, we would always get like one or two quasi yesteryear stars. I would always get like a guy like Ox Baker or I think we even maybe had Abdullah Butcher once. So when we got to see them in our gymnasium up close, it was the thrill of a lifetime for me. And that's kind of what I wanted to tell about in this book. It's a very fun story about the indie wrestling leagues, as well as it is, all the other stuff I talked about in this interview. It's a fun look at the inner workings of what goes on in indie wrestling leagues. And I did a lot of research for it and stuff, and I know guys that are part of indie wrestling leagues. So I kind of took a little piece of all the information and the leagues that I know of personally and kind of built this fictitious league, Brawl, Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league. And it's all about how Joeylicious still wrestles in grammar schools, and he's hoping to graduate one day, hopefully to wrestle in high school gyms and bigger gymnasiums and, maybe eventually become a wrestling superstar. But it's the fun climb up that wrestling ladder, starting from the lowest rung of the ladder, which is wrestling for 30 people, grammar school kids, nuns, and, bums inside a school gymnasium. And that's really what the underground wrestling leagues are still like today. You can go across the country and see, at your local Knights of Columbus or your local bingo hall or your local VFW, you'll see wrestling events all over the place.
I've got some ideas for some names of some signature moves Joeylicious could do.
Give it to me.
So the first one I thought of was, this is like your patent move. This is the one that all the fans come to see. This is what they want, and it's called the Pasta Vazul.
I like it. What's the move?
It's kind of like a suplex kind of type move, similar to that, but you can put your own signature on it and add a couple things into it. The other one.
Well, there's two moves that. I'm sorry, go ahead. You got another one. I like.
The other move I had is called the Gubbagal. Okay. The Gubbagal is like an elbow, kind of like the elbow down on the guy's head, like, oh, here comes the Joeylicious Gubbagal, kind of like that. And that paralyzes the guy. Then you can get on top of him, and then the guy can tap out.
I love it. I mean, you're obviously right on the same wavelength as me, because Joeylicious, Joeylicious really started in my old show Z-Rock when we had Chris Jericho on the episode. And, one of the moves that I used in that episode was called the garlic knock. And it was, literally my disgusting, because I do actually smell like garlic all the time from my wife's and my mother's cooking all my life. So when I get someone in a headlock, my disgusting underarm odor smells like garlic, and it kind of renders them unconscious. So that was one move I used in Z-Rock. And one of the other moves I actually talk about I think it's in the second Joeylicious book. When I was a kid, my nickname was Sada, short for Cassata.
Right.
And one of my moves that I had was called the Super Sada.
Yeah.
So like the Super Sada. So we're right on the same wavelength. It's so funny.
But what's cool about the Pasta Vazul is, like, when the stadium's cheering for it, they're like Pasta Vazul, and it kind of creates this tremor.
Pasta, I love it.
Yeah, Pasta Vazul, So I think these are promising, Joey. I think you should consider them.
Listen, I might have to hire you as one of the writers once we start production up again. I'd love to have you aboard.
Hey, I got way more coming from that. There's a lot that I had to cut from the list too. I just wanted to just name the top two, So
no, yeah. But I mean, if you enjoyed the first Joeylicious book, you're gonna you saw how the epilogue kind of ends off with, not to give anything away, but Chris Jericho appears in the epilogue, and we kind of take a bite off the Rocky storyline, where there's a chance Joeylicious gets a shot at the title coming up. So that's kind of how the first book is going to leave off. And then the second book is going to really dive into that Rocky storyline of when Apollo gave Rocky a shot at the title. So we're going to see a lot more shenanigans, a lot more 80s wrestling legends appearing. Chris Jericho himself will be a big, big part of the second book. The real Chris Jericho, not the imagination Chris Jericho. So it's going to be more of the same. It's, think of it as a one-book series, but just broken up into two parts.
I don't want to give away too much, but I'm just interested to see how you get back to your hometown.
You'll see.
So when can we expect part 2?
That's a good question. So part 2 is already completely written. It's just we're still formatting it. We're still, we wanted to see how part one did first. I could have easily released it as one part, but, I wanted to break it up. Like you said, it's an easy, quick read. During COVID, I know everyone's on Zoom and everyone's on this and everyone's cooped up in front of their laptop or stuff all day long. Not many people are traveling on the train or planes and stuff where they really can dive into a big, good book. So we wanted to split it up. That way you can read it in the backyard for a few minutes, a couple chapters, and kind of pick it back up. So, we're going to let this one breathe a little while. We'll probably have the new one out maybe for the new year, maybe for the Christmas season, depending on, how long the legs last on this one. And, depending on when production for the actual series starts up again. So, it all depends on the, supply and demand. The book is ready to go. The story has already been told. It's just a matter of when we're going to release it.
And if you were to look, to the future after part 2, when can we expect the Walk Around Pork recipe book?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. So, on Amazon.com right now, I have all my merch up now. So I have a lot of Wrestling with Joeylicious merch up there right now. There's the Wrestling with Joeylicious logo T-shirt. There's the Wrestling with Joeylicious on his face, holding his ears on the cover and like the book cover. There's even a Brawl Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league shirt for sale. I have a couple Z-Rock shirts for sale, and I am working on a Walking Around Pork shirt. So, the Walking Around Pork has taken a life of its own from Z-Rock. So there will be some merch coming out, maybe with some Walking Around Pork, and maybe even that'll be featured in an episode of Joeylicious coming up.
I know we talked on Facebook and you were like, come up with a design. So I got my buddy working on a design to send you.
Dude, let me know. I'm waiting on it. I told you I'm waiting for you to design it.
Dude, we also have to talk about, are we talking about, fried pork? Are we talking about pork chop pork? Are we talking about Italian sausage pork? What kind of porks go into this?
Listen, pork is pork. If it's travel pork, it's Walking Around Pork. It doesn't matter. The pork that I was eating the day on the set of Z-Rock, and it's so funny, the way Z-Rock was written, and I'm sure, I've said this a million times in a million interviews, but Z-Rock was completely improv. We'd have a basic structure, and, we kind of just go with it. And that day on set, we broke for lunch, and one of the producers and myself, we went to this little I forget what kind of store it was. It was I forget what it had, but they had like these little takeout carry around containers that you could get, little like fried pork and a little, pork in some like beautiful sauce. And there was just all different kinds of stuff that you could literally just have a to-go container of. And we got a couple of them just for lunch, and we were walking around with them. And we were like, oh, we got to just leave this in the skit right now. And we just left it in the skit. And that's how it started. That it was just organic like that.
I find that tremendous. That was one of my favorite scenes in Z-Rock, is the Walk Around Pork. Joey, it's been a blast. Thank you very much for doing it. The book, again, once for everybody, is Wrestling with Joeylicious. It's a great book. It's a great read. It's a great companion piece to his first book, Start With a Dream. I suggest you go out and buy it. Joey, go ahead and plug your stuff before we end.
You can get the book, as well as my old book, Start With a Dream. You can get Wrestling with Joeylicious on Amazon.com right now. It's a super cheap buy. It's like $12.99 on Amazon. If you have Prime, it's free shipping. It's a fun, quick read. Same thing with all the T-shirts and merch. You can get all of that stuff, one-stop shopping on Amazon.com. You can even go on Amazon and see the Wrestling with Joeylicious shorts we've been discussing. You can stream it on Amazon Prime for free if you have Prime. So, the whole world of Joeylicious kind of lives on Amazon right now, which is great for us. And you can also find me on social media at Joey Cassata across all the platforms, JoeyCassata across all the platforms. I am selling autographed copies of Joeylicious. If you want to contact me on social media, we can get a book shipped right out to you. But everything I do and promote is always on my Instagram page and or Facebook or Twitter. So find me there. Come say hello. I'm doing free giveaways all the time, whether it's books or merch and stuff like that. Go out, please check out the book. And if you do wind up reading it, reach out to me. I'd love to know what you think.
Awesome. Remember, gabagool and pasta vazul. Think about it.
Dude, I love it. I'm going to steal it. You got to edit that out of this podcast so I can feel it with it royalty free.
Don't worry about it. Joey, it's been a blast. Thank you very much for doing this. Take care, everybody. We will talk again soon. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso. Introducing Virtuo Up, the latest in a long line of innovation from Nespresso. It's innovation you can touch, sense, and taste in every single cup. With a 3-second start, easy open lever, and dedicated brew over ice button, it's even easier to enjoy your coffee your way. Sip for yourself. Shop Virtuo Up exclusively at Nespresso.com.